What's going on, Workforce? Brian here, and today we're breaking down a new episode of Community Feedback. This being focusing on, does Final Fantasy XIV have the blues? Or some other fun title that I think I'll come up with as I'm editing this video. For the most part, I've already expressed my sheer excitement over the concept of blue. I am very much looking forward to going hands-on with the job. We gave our initial reactions while we were at FanFest, and we've had a lot of conversations with everybody in the community, both positive and negative, who've had very different reactions to the Blue Mage. In fact, it's pretty interesting. Some people thought the idea of Blue Mage, that there, like, is there really people who are upset about it, and those who aren't really engaged maybe with the official forums, perhaps. But for the most part, Blue Mage really is a split job. Within the community, there are definitely people who are very excited about it, like myself, and there are people who are very upset about it. And we're going to hear from some of those people who are upset about it today, as well as some people who are excited about it in this episode of Community Feedback. If you guys are new to the channel and you don't know what is community feedback, it's a part of the conversation that we have with you. We are always very serious about trying to engage with everybody in the comment section, and then occasionally we like to be able to come and highlight some of those comments and present them here for you guys and continue that conversation on as well. If you guys are interested, hit that thumbs up button if you want to help share this video out to the world. It really helps us out. Obviously, if you want to watch the rest of the video before you decide whether you like it or not, that is obviously fine to do. It's just every time I do remind people of it, it obviously shows, and I do feel kind of weird about it. But that out of the way, let's jump into our first comments. So Genesis SOC writes, "This blue concept is terrible, and I hope enough people in Backlash edit that it will completely scrap it and remake it into a standard, proper DPS in the future. You can definitely design blue to feel and play like a Blue Mage without radically shifting the mold of the game. For example, here's my blue tank concept theory. Blue has an MT stance, learning. Being hit by it allows it to access defensive abilities like Mighty Guard, White Wind, etc. Think of the procs like a Paladin Shield Swipe and Heavensward Dark Knight Reprisal and Low Blow. OT stance is Lancet, hitting enemies will access the offensive abilities like Bad Breath and 1,000 Needles, etc. Both stances can be active at the same time, like Darks. Quests that can be standard job quests can instead be instance content. Literally, as you go in and out of the world, you get hit by the abilities and learn them. I think blue fans would be satisfied with this." And so there was actually a very similar idea that I proposed that the Genesis is on, is the idea of, I thought, like, if they were going to fit blue into the world of Final Fantasy XIV, it could kind of work as a druid type, a job that obviously has all three roles as a part of it. That it could be a tank of many stances in this regards. I thought a blue tank would be interesting because obviously you're being attacked and you're hitting the monster. It's interesting to see that we got a ranged DPS as far as it goes as a caster, and I'm wondering if we'll be able to build out obviously a tank for the blue itself. But regardless of that, the idea that I think I proposed like last year was literally like, let's get hit by the abilities. You can kind of take a job that has the different stances of the three current tanks based off the enemies, etc. So I think that obviously there would have been a way they could have forced it to work in Final Fantasy XIV. I think it's like anything, like if you're trying to force something into a specific mold, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to work out well. And personally, I think, and I've kind of expressed this in other videos and other topics regarding Final Fantasy XIV, it's all kind of cookie cutter. I mean, to use the mold concept, it's like everything has been cookie cutter up to this point. Every warrior is just like another warrior. Every tank is really a tank. Every healer is a healer. And I hope, and we'll have to wait to see how we go with it in 4.5 when it actually comes out, is that we'll be able to uniquely build out many of these different builds. Like you could, it's a caster, but it's also a tank, or it's a caster, but you can kind of build out a healing build depending on if you have the skills, especially as the level cap increases over time. I think that a lot of at least the backlash that I've seen from people has been because that they had a kind of an idea in their mind how it would work. We've spent a lot of time, speculating and theorizing on how could a Blue Mage work in the world of Final Fantasy XIV and try to somewhat remain true to its roots. I'm personally, like I said, really happy that they're going a different direction. We're going to see if this pans out over the long haul. Well, I mean, only time will tell if it does. But at the core of it, it doesn't feel cookie cutter. It feels freeing. I've said this before. It's interesting that they're calling it the limited system because it really feels unlimited in its potential. Not that it's going to be raid ready day one, but that we're beta testing this and that it has unlimited potential because it's the first job they're introducing that has a lot of builds. And I hope that it's successful. I hope that once people go hands-on with it, that the worry and the fear subsides. The fact that you can do content with people, but they had to make something from a solo perspective because in case people don't want to play with Blue. Maybe Blue is going to be so underpowered that it's just not going to make sense in the world of raid progression. And maybe that's where feedback and adjustments come in. And instead of throwing kind of a nuclear bomb into Omega, boom, like AlphaScape. Oh yeah, everybody's got to be Blue, or for the love, no Blues ever allowed, ever. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, but I do feel where Genesis is coming from. I think they could have, again, like I said, fit it in. I think we would have lost a lot. I think we would have sacrificed a lot to make that happen. So Alexander writes, the worst possible implementation of a job ever. And there's a whole comment section defending it. White knighting is a mental sickness, a pandemic of our time. Square Enix should announce a reset of all character progress across all worlds tomorrow, and there would be people saying, hey, it's a breath of fresh air. We can experience it all in-game again. And I'm going to just touch on the white knighting. White knighting, I think, is essentially can be a very bad thing for the game. I think essentially staunch defense of a game, defense of any critique of a game, only is going to make the game worse. It's only going to lead to the destruction of the game. It's only going to eventually burn out. I honestly think white knighting is a path to essentially where you just can't stand the game. And maybe there are definitely exceptions to that. So I don't think I'd go as far as calling it a mental sickness. I think essentially there is a couple different relationship pieces that people have with it. And it's always interesting. Obviously, I made the video, the infamous video, talking about why Final Fantasy XIV is dying. To touch on that here is literally that the Blue Mage, for me, I think is a big breath of fresh air to the game. It changes up the mold. It changes up the direction. Everything, like I said in the previous comments, kind of cookie cutter for the most part. That's not to say that it's not challenging content. That's not to say that it's not good content. That's not to say that the story isn't good. It's just to say that it is very repetitive. And then the response to that, I'm like, well, it's an MMO. What do you expect? I go, I expect the game to try and surprise and delight me. And that's exactly what Blue is doing. We'll have to wait and see how we go with hands-on with it. But the idea that people are excited about white, the Blue Mage, doesn't necessarily put them right in the same category as a white knight in this case. I do agree that they could reset everybody back to level 1. And yes, there would be some people saying, well, thank you. This is exactly what I was wanting. Because as a group of people, as a community that's fans of this game, we're very diverse. We all have different wants and needs. And the question is that, what's the right choice? And what we want isn't always going to be the right choice. Blue Mage could end up being just this horrible train wreck. And I think that would be unfortunate because when they start talking about Beastmaster, Puppet Master, you could think of any other job. Just to kind of as an aside, it'd be interesting to see if we got to see certain limited versions of the current jobs, like Summoner, for example. I think that would be really exciting. And I think essentially if we started seeing that, we could easily see some of these limited jobs getting a kind of a standard build. Like they said that Blue Mage is going to have access to PvP. Well, at the core of it, especially because PvP isn't necessarily required to enjoy 14, they could easily just set up here's a standard Blue PvP build. And then it really isn't a hop, skip, or jump to be able to say, here's a standard unlimited, non-limited build of it. And who's to say that we're not going to get that in the future? I think a lot of people need to start to look at the game at its core as it goes to level 80 and 90 and 100. As the game continues to live on, introducing a job is becoming even more and more and more work because you have to look at content for all of these different phases as we progress vertically through the story and through the worlds. I'm not going to spoil anything, guys. Anyhow, so I don't necessarily equate people who are excited about Blue Mage. I actually would say that people who are excited about Blue Mage more or less have been looking for something different that the game can offer. They've been more or less the ones who've been critical of the game, like myself. And critical and critique, I think, are fine. I definitely am not somebody who agrees with pure bashing. I think when you're going to offer critique, you got to offer something about it. Like, it'd be cool if this or something like that. There's also people who, really attach a lot of their personal feelings to the game itself, to this community, and any kind of front can be, like, oh, we have to defend our our world because it's being attacked. And it all, I guess, depends on the approach that people take. Like, are you just slinging mud, or are you actually saying, like, you know what, it's not, perfect here and here. This would be interesting as, a conversation piece, so to say. White knighting, I think, is something that leads to a downfall of a game. And that's just where I stand, because I guess people can accuse me of being a white knight sometimes, or a black knight, white hat or black hat, as far as it goes. But that's just going to have to be where it is. So Alexander isn't wrong, but I definitely don't agree where you're coming from. Thank you so much, though, for the comment. And then we have Oni, friend of the show, been on the podcast, going to be up on iFuture podcast here, I think, within a week or so. Says, in any shape or form, I'm just happy to get to play the job. Plus, the carnival looks and smells like a monster arena from 10. So I'm all over that like a bad rash. 4.5 is going to get pretty intense. And yes, I absolutely agree. I like the concept of the carnival because it almost feels like if nobody wants to play this job, or nobody will play with anybody who's playing this job, let's make sure they have something to do. Let's give them some kind of content. And so it does feel like a monster arena. You got the 25 different kind of plans of attack with 3 rounds each. I think it's going to be interesting to see how people kind of approach that. From a guide's perspective, that's going to be insane, because it's like you've got all of these different possibilities, different builds, and what's going to be the best and most efficient. Oh my gosh, the permutations, they just they have me really excited, because we haven't had that in this game whatsoever. It's interesting that, like we talked about it, and we're going to keep talking about it, started at level 50. The level cap's going to be increased. It's going to be, the question is how soon is this job at level cap? How soon is this available to do the end-game rating? We're just going to have to wait and see. We're going to have to provide feedback. The biggest concern here is that something like the Eggy Glamis system that just like, hey, here we go, and then it's like, we're going to update this, and then they never do. Oh, we're going to do this, and then they don't. So if Blue Mage ends up becoming that, I think I'm going to quickly shift my excitement, from like, hey, you guys introduced it at level 50, and it's 2021, and it's still level 50. What happened? Hopefully that's not the case. I'm defaulting on the excitement side for now. Cautiously optimistic. I'm not putting all my faith in the blue basket. But the nice thing is that we're also getting 2 jumps with the expansion, so there is that and that sense of hope. So we'll have to wait and see. Thanks, Mioni. So John 041065 writes, I'd rather they not have done blue at all instead of this. The solo stuff sounds cool, but they should have just done Onion Knight for that and really just let us go crazy with build your own job concepts and leaderboards. And I don't actually disagree with John from an Onion Knight, a build your own job customization leaderboards perspective. Maybe we can get there. I think it comes down to, the expectation. We've been asking for blue, like interview, hey, is blue coming? Like, people want blue. How can we get Blue Mage? Blue Mage is a very popular job, and it could pave the way to what they talked about, like with Beastmaster, Puppet Master, Onion Knight. Like, imagine Chemist. Imagine, like, there's a lot of possibilities here. So to go off and say personally you'd rather not have it, I honestly think this could be the most refreshing thing. Could fail. We've talked about that. We're going to have to wait and see. Not a big deal if it does. I'm going to be disappointed, absolutely. But let's say it doesn't. And then, like, your concept of Onion Knight here, your concept of all these things. Even, and John and I have had a couple of conversations, privately, talking kind of about, is there a middle ground? Is there something like that that could happen and be attached into it? And I think the answer is, yeah. I think we could see the community end up kind of deciding on, like, hey, if this was going to be a non-limited build, this is what it should look like. For me, Blue Mage feels like we're working with the devs on this one. We'll have to wait and see if that's true. But as a beta concept, as somebody who does not, as a game that does not have a public test realm, as a game that I always joke that Eureka is the relic test realm, because they're testing out different things. They're doing a lot of experimentation that doesn't break the core game. Blue kind of falls into that category. They can kind of do things turn around them quickly, and they're not going to blow out the raid scene. They're not going to negatively impact people. Now, people are disappointed because people want to raid right now with blue because they've been wanting that. And so it's still like, oh man, when are we going to get that? Hopefully they can actually then kind of communicate, like, what's the pathway? How long should it be expected? Because if blue's introduced here, is it a year before it's raid ready? If that's the case, that's fine. But that way we can finally get that expectation. They're really good at delivering content, you know, at various intervals. So, you know, the game's biggest critique recently is that it's been predictable. This throws into that predictability in weird ways, and so we're left wondering when is this going to be X, Y, and Z? And as soon as that starts to get fleshed out, as jobs are then introduced into the limited system, we would start to have a reasonable expectation of when they might be raid ready. And I hope that personally, just like with your concept that you talked about with Onion Knight, just with all these different concepts, that we're going to see more things being introduced this way, because I think from a development perspective, from a cost perspective, it'll be easier to bring things into the system, develop them together, and then release them out into the world. And then that way we're not sitting here left where we're just getting one job per expansion, or heaven forbid, like, hey, no jobs this expansion. It's just so much work with the existing 30 jobs that we have currently in the game, or something like that. Now, right now it's 18. Somebody will be like, there's not 30 jobs. Anyway, thanks, John, for the comment. Then Kimmy the Beat writes, raiders are loud and no one likes a job they can't use for the content they spend most of their time on. Raiding is basically based off the interaction with other players, so of course a lot of people are upset. But I do think mainly raiders overlook the fact that there are a large portion of players that fly solo, even in an MMO. Adding a job suited for solo play is great. People that play solo will prefer never to touch raid content. It's good to see that it's aimed for all types of players. They pay the same sub fee and basically are taking care of a wider crowd. What does raiders or non-solo players get? Basically everything else. So the concept that this is a solo-only job, I think, is a little bit of a misinterpretation. I think also their example, the level 5 death spell, was a poor example, because the obvious answer is just make the bosses immune to that spell, or just have it do damage if it doesn't kill them, you know, things like that. It seemed like a very weird response, or at least a weird example. The bad breath example, you don't have bad breath is required, go get bad breath. Makes a lot of sense to me. But when it talks about the raiding scene, though, yeah, I think a lot of people want to raid. I think it'll be interesting to see what we do with Blue Mage in the old raiding scene from, you know, Crystal Tower raids, and obviously the Binding Coil of Bahamut. What's that going to look like for the blue? What are the builds, not just for the job itself, but also for party makeup? It's going to be fun and experimenting in that regards, and maybe it might refresh that raid scene for people in a way. But yes, it's not current raiding, etc. I think that the loudest would be if it was introduced and if it was so OP that it was literally bring in a warrior, bring in a healer, and then the rest of everybody's Blue Mage. If it was so OP and people were just burning down savages, I think there'd be a lot of people who might be upset by that fact. Like, even if people who've never done savage just walk in and just lay waste to it, that would, I think, also then have a negative impact. It's hard, like, as somebody who is not a savage raider, but who does go and do the raids and enjoys them, I like that style. I do want to be able to participate with blue in that regards, but I think I'm on the fence of I'd rather wait and work with them, and that's why I see it as a beta, and hopefully I'm not wrong. Thanks, Kimmy. Sonati XD writes, disappointed they should make blue as a normal job. They should make an adapted blue for 14 that gets skills fighting monsters in normal job quests. There's no reason to create a job for solo play, and they should have created solo content for the jobs. So I'm a little bit confused on that last piece. I'm wondering if it shouldn't have been created solo content for the jobs, or that solo content should be created for all jobs, like there should be a warrior carnival and all of that. Honestly, that could be pretty cool to see, just varying jobs to have that little bit. I don't see blue as a solo job. I see that it had to design it so that it has that as an option. How do you level when you can't do random matchmaking? How do you actually do that? And they haven't really fleshed out the open world, so it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out overall, because it's not like blue can't go into the new zones. The new zones are just going to be at the higher level, and maybe you'll get destroyed. Who knows? Maybe blue's just more powerful than everything, but we'll have to wait and see. I get that people definitely are disappointed. I wanted to make sure, hopefully I've highlighted that in some of the concepts. Personally, I mean, I'm still going to have to wait and see. Like, when we get our hands on with Blue, when we've played with it, when we see how it feels, is it going to be something that I'm left going like, yeah, they should have just allowed me to do matchmaking? Or no, like this is a smarter system. A lot of people have also in the comments compared that, like, hey, 11 did this. Why is 14 doing this other thing? And it's honestly, I think 14 is doing more like how 11 did it. The only concept is that 11 didn't have matchmaking and 14 does. And how do you introduce jobs that you have those standard builds? I'm wondering if we'll get to a standard build, like I said earlier. We'll just have to wait and see. But Natty, hopefully we'll see, come January how the community feels. It's going to be interesting to see that month, especially because there's other big releases of games coming out. So will people really dive into this, really own this? Will there be all kinds of crazy content to consume as well as to make? We'll have to wait and see. But thank you so much for the comment. Hopefully come January, February, it's exciting for the majority of people. That's my hope. Thanks for the comment. So Mayonnaise Samurai writes, Blue solo content and PC trust system, this game is slowly turning into a solo game. And so for Mayonnaise, like, I don't agree. I think it already is a solo game. And I've said that, and I know a lot of people disagree. Oh, it's an MMO. Well, it is, but it's also a single player solo RPG that randomly throws you into match-made content. I'm not saying that it needs to be a solo game. I'm not saying that it doesn't need to be an MMO. But obviously the raids and the trials and all of that is geared to that MMO style. But everything else, story-wise, mission-wise, everything's geared solo. And the fact that that's actually some of the core concepts and problems that the game has actually developed over time. The game does not teach you how to play your job. People are like, oh, you need a level and you learn. No, like it doesn't. Like if you're a white mage and you're doing the story, you learn how to cast stone. You don't learn how to Dinsuna. You don't learn how to heal. Like some of the job quests, try and do that. Whether it's successful or not, it's going to, I guess, depend on the individual. But you're out there in the world solo by yourself, playing the story, doing the story fights solo by yourself, randomly getting thrown into, I guess, group dungeon content at different intervals. It is a solo game. It's not turning into one. It's always been one. I've long wanted to see more open world level sync. Also, that if a friend and a friend, like, hey, we're playing together, instead of like having to do this fight solo by ourselves, it'd be great if we could do it together and the content just scale up for the fact that we have more people into the fight. This is how it used to be back in the day, and I'm not saying back in the day is the way and where we want to go with it, but 14 is a solo game from where I look at it. You can play this game pretty much solo. The matchmaking system kind of helps include that. You don't really have to talk with people, and that's been some of the complaints that people have leveraged against like 2.0 and beyond. That's not saying it's bad. It's not saying it's good. It's just saying I think that's what it is. I think these systems in and of themselves, kind of continue that trend, but we'll have to see if it really impacts us. Like I said, I think in the NPC trust video, which this isn't about, is that if you're balancing the game around a party, you're balancing the open world around knowing that there's at least going to always be 4 people with you or more. You could actually do a lot more in the open world. You can really kind of make it more of actually a multiplayer game. So maybe we'll hopefully see that these single player fights turn into multiplayer fights, and the difficulty just scales up with I can bring a trust or I can bring a human. That's my hope. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out, but thanks for the comment. And finally, Max Power writes, this whole blue thing sounds like it's putting the RPG back into the MMORPG at its basic level. What's not to like? Creating builds, gathering skills, not as automatic level ups, but actually learning them? Something MMOs have really been lacking over the last 10 years or so. And Max, I cannot agree with you more. That's where I'm coming from. That's where it's like, I want something to sink my teeth in. I want some horizontal content. Here's the catch, and to wrap up the video, and to wrap up kind of my final thoughts regarding it, because I think you're right in the ballpark. How do you make a game that is inviting to new players and doesn't punish new players for not being here 6 years ago or 7 years ago or 3 years ago, while at the same time also rewarding players who have been and giving them content and things to work on? And that's the overall challenge that 14 has. At its core, at its root, it has a challenge, and that is, how do you make this content relevant over the course of a long period of time? And then at the same time, how do you also then not punish the new players? New players have been coming in, and we are seeing this very successfully with the game as a whole. They're bringing in new data centers, bringing in new servers. The game is continuing to grow in people, and it's bringing in new players, but it's also somewhat leaving old, old dogs, for lack of expression for myself, with little or nothing to do in the game. And we've talked about this a lot, and that's a theme about the game. It's like, where is our horizontal content? And to do horizontal content, do it right, it shouldn't punish those that are coming in. Somebody who's coming in today shouldn't have to play an additional 1,000 or million hours just so that they can now participate in the content that I'm participating in for the most part. And there's different ways to go about it. We also want to make sure that you can take a break from the game and you're not going to come back and have an insane grind just to be able to get into the content. That de-incentivizes players, and that's one of the things that the balance that they've established has been on the fairly positive side overall for the health of the game. For the long-term health of the game, though, this is something that is exciting. It brings back some of that concept, bringing back some of that RPG, bringing back some of that horizontal content, and I hope that it's successful. I hope that people really start to dive in, feel that it's something to work towards if they want to, and have a good time. I think it's also to see kind of where you're going to see kind of a shift. There's already been this kind of shift in what do I do? I was talking with Chili on the podcast, and he's like, I want to log in and play, but I've cleared Savage, I've got everything done, I have nothing to do. What is there to do? And there's, so horizontal content helps to make that, you're doing things, and so you're kind of progressing these other systems, ever be it slowly. Vertical content is really great because it allows people, and they have got the catch-up mechanics, and that's one of the things that a lot of people are like, my gear just keeps getting replaced. Blue Mage, when you learn those skills, you've got those skills, you've made that investment, and as they add that level cap and they add new skills, there is that continual increasing investment in time that when you go and you make that investment, it pays off in the long run. It's going to have to be wait to see how it works in modern games. Is this a telling thing for me as a player who's wanting more, who's wanting to do more, but that's just because of the callback? Is this introduced, and does it have a negative impact on the community? We'll have to wait and see. The community is interestingly split on this. I think it's interesting to see where people fall, where we might disagree in some areas, we agree here on this. And that in and of itself is, the best answer for all of this is wait and see. Wait and see. Let's go hands-on. It's not far along. I think it's going to be a fun journey. Hopefully, now that it's been at least a few weeks, any kind of reaction is starting to kind of set in. We're starting to get some level of excitement or acceptance. We'll obviously have a new live letter coming up here in a little bit. We're guessing that the release date for 4.5 is going to be January 8th. So just kind of keep that in your wheelhouse. If you stuck with us this far, I really appreciate it. Make sure you hit that like button if you like this video. It really helps us out, helps share these types of content. If you like our community feedbacks, be sure always to let us know. We really enjoy making these videos. This is the video. It does take a lot more work, but it's the most fun that I have here in the system. So guys, for Work To Game, my name is Brian. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Oh, excuse me. What's up, workforce? Chuck here, telling you should totally like, favorite, subscribe, share, dance, raise your hands in the air. I'm off camera. I'm off frame. I'm new at this. Hey, listen. Yes. You haven't hit that subscribe button. You totally should. I recommend it. Chuck approved. Anyway. Also, thanks to all the Patreons. You're in the corners. Whoa!